It's quite unfortunate that we have to have this discussion because it places a lot of pressure now on currency, and I think given the point that we are currently right now, as from an economic perspective, we need to ensure that the rand is as stable as possible, so as to ensure that we don't have a backlash from the consumer side as well. But I think this particular discussion is slightly misplaced in terms of what the role of monetary policy is and what the role of the central bank should be. In this particular discussion, we've already been nationalize or don't nationalize, do whatever, it's neither here or there. It doesn't affect how monetary policy works in South Africa. What's quite important is the independence of the South African Reserve Bank, because what data shows us is that countries that are able to execute their mandate in stabilizing prices as much as possible are countries whose central banks operate independently without political interferences. Because quite evidently, whenever a politician has a shortfall in terms of economic planning or policy deficiencies, the first thing to do is to say, let's tinker with the money supply so as to print money in order to stimulate further growth. But that tends to be shortcuts that are short-lived, and the current mandate of the Reserve Bank is implicit in attending or addressing the question of employment and job creation. Price stability is part of the broader plan, part of the broader macroeconomic policy to address issues of employment and job creation in the South African economy. So I think it's quite unfortunate that this debate continues to happen because we continue to receive a hammering on the currency side. Quantitative easing is an instrument that central banks have available to them to increase money supply in economies, particularly economies that are stagnant and are no longer growing. And in a situation where there's 0% inflation, part of the process of increasing the money supply in the economy so as people who borrow money can borrow that money at a much cheaper cost because interest rates are low. And once you're able to do that, the idea is that once people borrow more, they'll be able to spend more, and that'll kickstart the economy once again to an upward trajectory. But again, I think the Reserve Bank governor had already cited one of the conditions that are premised on whether or not to use that instrument. And that becomes quite important because part of the discussion is to say, no, but the US also had, after the 2009 and 2000 crisis, also used this instrument of quantitative easing. But in the US case, it was quantitative easing accompanied by other policies. So they had increased the money supply in their own economy. That was primarily because investors in US stocks and US assets didn't care whether the interest rates that they would get from their returns would be neither here or there, primarily because they were in a crisis. So whatever happened, they could do to be able to move with that particular instrument. The second part is that on the fiscal side, there were investment tax incentives in the US by that President Obama directed to the automotive industry, which is part of one of the largest industries in the US economy, so as to kickstart that economy again. So the idea of quantitative easing is not a singular instrument that can be used to kickstart an economy.
It's got to be accompanied by other policies.
Certainly.